Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. I'm Jackie Brenner, a pre-med student who has enjoyed meeting other STEM students from around the world through my TikTok and Discord STEM Potential. I created these STEM Potential webinars in order to combat the lack of mentorship and representation that I noticed in the STEM fields. We are an online Discord that provides a network for all students to share their unique perspectives from diverse backgrounds and create strong connections. Discord members can act as mentors and mentees as they progress along the stages of their education while also finding friends with common interests. I would like to give a special shout out to all members of the STEM Potential team for working together to make this all possible. And especially Ashini, if you can turn your camera on for a second. Ashini has been working hard with me through STEM Potential. She's my best friend in the 7-year med program with me and is moderating a session later today. But big thank you to Ashini. It wouldn't be possible without her, any of this. I am proud and humbled to have assembled a group of incredibly successful STEM professionals. This session will be highlighting 5 students and professionals that have unique perspectives in the fields of, you'll hear about it, but various different fields in STEM. So to jump right into it, I just want to start off by allowing each panelist to give a 3 to 5 minute introduction. Karissa, would you like to start us off?
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining. My name is Karissa Muñoz. I am a 5th year PhD candidate at the University of California, Irvine. And I am studying chlamydia, particularly different drugs that can slow down chlamydia growth. And I'm in the Department of Developmental and Cell Biology. I don't remember if I said that. I have had a crazy journey with science and research. I started doing some research in undergrad. I went to Claremont McKenna. I got some exposure there. And then I fell in love with it and decided to get a PhD. So I went straight from undergrad to get my PhD. And I have a lot of advice for all of you guys. So I'm really excited for your questions. And thank you again for joining.
Awesome. Thank you. Paul, would you like to go next?
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for inviting me today. My name is Paul Cross. I'm from London, as you can tell from the accent. My background is in clinical research. So I've been working in research for about 20 years. I did a BSc in applied biology and then specialized in physiology at university with my first degree. And then I got a job in a trials unit and spent the next 10 to 15 years doing clinical trials in the NHS, the National Health Service in the UK. I wanted to develop further, so I did a master's in clinical research and later a PhD in the benefit risk assessment of medicines. I've since gone into science communication and did a lot of work with schools actually, so education in particular with young people. And I'm also a children's author, so I've got some STEM non-fiction books which I've written, which are out. So yeah, it's really great to be here. I'm looking forward to answering your questions.
Awesome, thank you. I need to read your book. I'm so excited. Jamie, would you like to go next?
Hi, I'm really excited to be here and just to meet other people in STEM. My name's Jamie Ellis. Most people actually know me by the Space Babe on TikTok. I am a non-traditional advocate into the way of aerospace. My background is a bachelor's of science in geology, but prior to graduation, I have about 3 years of experience in environmental science and about 6 years as a NASA JPL Solar System Ambassador, which is a role in science communications for public and community outreach. So I'm trained by the scientists and engineers behind a multitude of missions through these teleconferences. And then I conduct events to my liking. So I've done a lot of more sci-fi related events. But in the last 2 years, I became a part of a private think tank known as Pacific Spaceflight, which is now a part of a small little TV show on Discovery Channel. We are making low commercialized spaceflight suits. I've gotten to test a Mars EVA prototype with geological testing, so I am their consultant geologist. But I also run flight ops data managing, so I've gotten to learn a lot of different things in aerospace. And they're actually right now in the field doing some high altitude testing and trying to just think, one last thing is I'm also a citizen astronaut candidate for Space for Humanity. We're still kind of waiting to see what the next round is going towards, but I'm your non-traditional way into going into the world of aerospace. I'm very happy to be here and answer any of your questions.
Wow, you do everything. Next, Marilu.
Yep. Thanks for inviting me. Yeah, I'm Marilu. I'm from Italy, as you can hear, and I am a PhD student here at the University of Valencia, Polytechnic University. And even if I started as pharmaceutical chemistry in the University of Florence, now I'm more working a project about bioengineer, biomedical engineer. Yeah, it was kind of weird, my path in science, but I really love it. And I'm here because I love stem cells. In fact, I'm working with stem cells, human-induced pluripotent stem cells, and I differentiate them into atrial cardiomyocytes, so heart cells. And yeah, my field, so it's now in between biology, medical, and bioengineer, something like that. And I'm working with atrial fibrillation, and during my years in science, also realized that I really love science communication. So Paul, I would love to ask you a few questions because I'm working on my own project of science communication, but yeah, it's in Italian. Hopefully I will switch to English in the future, let's see. And yeah, I will happy to answer to your question also about, I don't know, European PhD and opportunities all around Europe. Yeah, thanks.
Awesome. Thank you. And last but not least, Jordan.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jordan. I'm a first-year PhD student at Caltech. I was originally born in Los Angeles, but moved to Calgary, Alberta in Canada to grow up, and kind of had this idea really that began in the beginning of high school that I wanted to come to California for school. And so I was lucky enough to get into UC Berkeley and majored in chemistry there with the idea of being pre-med and going to med school. However, I got really captured by organic chemistry and started to fall in love with the beauty and just the, I guess, I felt very invigorated scientifically by the subject. And so I, in my junior year, decided to full on pursue organic chemistry and just started my PhD here in September. And so I'm also on TikTok. My handle's Hey It's Jordy. And I love making scientific content as well as any LGBT and STEM relatable content. So really great to be here and meet all of you.
Awesome. Well, thank you for those amazing introductions. And also just for anyone watching, their full bios are on the website and we will drop their social media links after, as well as you can find that all on the website. So now we will move into the first part of our Q&A. If you'd like to ask any questions, again, please submit it through the chat function for everyone to view. So to get started, I want to just start with, how did you choose your field and why? And maybe we can go to Jordan first, and then I just want to open it up to everyone else.
Yeah, so that's a great question, Jackie. And I think really it boils down to, for me, kind of seeing where I could contribute the most. And so I had this idea in high school and that I wanted to be a doctor. And I was really committed to the idea and thought really it was for me. And when I got to college, I didn't really feel like it was for me anymore. I felt like I had changed and my interests had changed. And that put me in a really hard position because I've always thought of myself as someone who doesn't quit. And I saw switching paths as almost quitting to this thing that I had dedicated a lot of thought and energy towards achieving. And it wasn't until the end of my first year organic chemistry sequence, at the end of my sophomore year, where I was able to talk with the professor that I ended up working for in his lab, where he said, redirection is not quitting. This is a really great opportunity that you have to kind of explore this field more. And I had been really lucky to get some really great mentorship. And so I would say that, I chose my field based on something what I was passionate about and what I felt right doing. And that has been the most seamless kind of way that I've chosen this field. So, yeah.
Oh, well, that's awesome. Maybe Karissa, you can go next. Tell us a little bit about your field.
Hi, everyone. I kind of always loved biology because in high school I had a teacher. She reminded me of Miss Frizzle. I don't know if any of you have seen Magic School Bus, but she had red hair, crazy outfits, and we had animals all in our class. And I was just like, wow, I really love this. She seemed really happy. I was learning a lot. So I decided to major in biology at Claremont McKenna. And if any of you guys are familiar with Claremont, it's a small school, so we do have some research opportunities, and but it's not nearly as like, I guess, expensive as like if you go to a larger university. So I like dipped my toes into the research field there, and I had like emailed almost every professor on like the department list, and I got one response back, and she was the professor I ended up doing we have our theses in our undergrad. So I did a thesis with her, and it was just like the best experience ever. And I decided to, okay, like let's keep going. I wanted to get a PhD after that, but it's mainly because of like these amazing female scientists that I saw in my just growing up. I was like, man, if they can do it, like I can do it too. So like the representation was really important for me. And then even now, my boss is a woman, and it's actually I'm co-mentored between female and male PI, and it's I would say that I didn't really focus too much on the subject. I kind of was like Jordan. I was like, oh, maybe I'll do med school, but then I decided not to when I fell in love with research, and I was kind of focused more on the environment and where I felt like I would fit in the most or get the most support. So I just ended up doing chlamydia. I didn't think I would do chlamydia research. I just kind of fell into it. But I guess that's more of like my advice is finding a space where you can do what you love, but also where you have others that can support you doing what you love. Yeah.
We're definitely gonna have to touch back on that idea of mentorship, maybe after this question. Marilou, you wanna go next?
Yeah, I really feel you, Jordan, because I actually switched from chemistry to, biomedical stuff. So I was scared as well because I actually never studied, never, stem cells. But during an event that I organized, because I organized a lot of scientific festival and events at the university, I invited this professor, and she started talking for 2 hours about stem cells and what they can do. And I was so amazed, like I was almost crying because I don't know, it was really weird. And then I thought, okay, what I want to do, because if I think about myself in the lab working with chemistry, I thought, that's so sad. Cells are alive. The stem cells, they can, once they are like cardiomyocytes, you can see them beating and contracting. And I was so amazed. And then I decided, okay, I don't care if I never studied that. I want to work with that. And then I found my mentor at the University of Florence, that she was working with stem cells and derived cardiomyocytes. And then when I first met her, I understood that that was my path. That's it.
Awesome. Maybe Paul, you can tell us a little bit about your field. It's so diverse.
Sure. I'm kind of hearing the same kind of, I feel very similar to what the others have said actually, which is I wanted to be a doctor when I was a student actually at school, and didn't feel right. So I kind of didn't end up doing it. So I ended up doing a biology degree because like Karissa, I really love biology and nature, and I specialized in human biology and realized that medicine some kind of medicine was the way I wanted to go. I wasn't sure how. And then I ended up getting a job in a phase 1 clinical trials unit in London after I graduated. And that was it. That sort of directed me on my path really. And I worked very closely with volunteers who were receiving medicines. And then I realized, actually, I want to work in the NHS. I want to do this research, but actually with patients. So I went into a patient-facing role, which was like working on the studies and collecting data, actually doing patient visits. I loved that did that for many years. And then that's when I realized I wanted to start studying again, actually, and do some more. And specialize in something. And my passion was, sounds really weird, but adverse reactions. Actually, adverse reactions were happening so much within populations that there was a lot of work to be done to help improve their reporting in particular. So I specialized in that for my master's, and the PhD was about benefit risks. So looking at the risks of, for example, adverse reactions to medicines and the benefit balance of that, and actually getting the patients involved in those discussions. So what does that mean for a patient? You know, it's very easy for a physician to say the benefits are here, the risks are here, and obviously the benefits must outweigh the risks. But what do the patients think, and getting their inputs? That's what my PhD was about, was in actually talking to, for example, oncology patients, actually talking to them about their treatment, doing focus groups, and actually understanding their perspective as well, to bring that into the process more about drug approval. I've also worked on vaccine research since 2018, and I had no idea where that was going to go. So that's been a busy 2 years, and obviously some of the work I've done in the last year has been about the COVID vaccines, and that's been obviously it's been a complete eye-opener, really. Also very relevant. The benefit risk work is very relevant to what we're doing now as we administer the vaccines to millions of people. Yeah, the benefits must outweigh the risks. So it's really kind of relevant, and that's where my science communication work has come in.
All right, and Jackie had already asked if I wanted to jump in next. And so for me, it actually started out, I feel like I'm very similar to everyone else. I actually started in medicine when I first was in college, but my grades were not staying up to par. And this actually kind of relates to the geology major in a bit. But I ended up taking an intro to geology class, never had an earth science class prior to, but Dr. Clark was this just adorable little lady with this mini afro who came in with a passion. And when she was talking about volcanoes, I felt it truly in like my soul, like this fiery passion. And I just knew then that geology was that calling. And from there, it turned into them actually discovering that I was a moderate dyslexic. And so without that major, I probably wouldn't have known and gotten the diagnosis at the time that I did, which made a big understanding to how I really observed the world and more. Through geology and continuing the research I did in my undergrad during my field camp course, was how I fell in love with the Milky Way. And I remember staring up at the night sky in New Mexico with no light pollution. And I just knew then, I was like, I need to do something with the stars. And ironically, a Facebook ad popped up with the NASA JPL Solar System Ambassador Program. I looked into it to make sure, it was legit. And of course it was. It's a very extensive application in order to be selected for the program. And I became one of the youngest, or actually the youngest at the time, to be selected. A lot of people part of the program are retired teachers and more, but I was able to break ground to become one of the younger ambassadors, who then has kind of broken way for other ambassadors to use social media for science communications. And from there, when I was at one of the JPL open houses, I met a fellow ambassador who was a part of Pacific Spaceflight. And that's how I got to be a part of that amazing private think tank and be in the Mars EVA suit to test it for geological tests. That actually got published in the Royal Aeronautical Society Journal. And like I mentioned earlier, we are part of a small TV show known as Homemade Astronauts. So it's kind of, for me, it's always been like what I have felt, but I've always known at the moments, just when experiencing it, that I was among the right path. So for anyone that's looking to figure out if you're in that, you'll feel it. You will feel that passion, and you want to always hold on to that passion, because it's always carried me through some of my darkest of times.
Clearly, mentorship has played a huge role, but I want to move into, even if you have a great mentor, how do you know if the lab is a good fit for you, especially for those pursuing their PhD, being in the lab for, Karissa, 5 years, how did you know you were ready to do that, or that was something you would want to do? Maybe you can start us off.
So great question. So obviously the mentorship with you or the relationship that you have with your professor is very important, but I have almost found that the most important relationship was the one that I had with my lab mates or my coworkers, because those are the people that you spend like 99% of your time with. And for me, we all kind of joined at the same time. There was like 3 graduate students and a postdoc. We all joined at the same time, and there wasn't anybody in the lab before, so we took like a giant risk. But we all got along very well. I would say, just see, are these people that you could talk to, collaborate with for like experiments? Like, how are they? Because you'll come across some people, I guess not to be too negative, but I mean, there are people who are very competitive or like secretive with their work. And that's just something that you want to avoid, because that's not going to be good to your mental health or to your development as a scientist in general. Like, we should be collaborative and helping each other out, because you can't do everything alone. That's one thing that I learned. Like, before, I feel like in undergrad and like, you know, doing undergrad research, it's like I'm getting exposure, but there's that what is it, the stakes aren't there. Like, the research can work out or not work out, but it's fine, it's just experience. Versus like in graduate school, you have to make stuff work. You have to come up with experiments that will be critical, or that will help push your project along. And it's sometimes you feel like you can't do it all alone, so you want to have those good connections and relationships with your lab mates. And that was probably the most important thing for me.
Yeah, echoing what you said, you can't do anything alone, and especially making those connections. Marilou, I wanted to ask how your experience has been different, because I know you did your PhD or some research in Germany for a while, then you moved to Spain. So maybe you can talk a little bit about that process.
Yeah, so yeah, it was awful for for something like for COVID, for example, because when I started in Germany, COVID started also in Italy and then in Germany, in the whole Europe. So it was, oh my God. Yeah. But, you know, at the beginning of my path, I thought, yeah, I can work whenever I want in any place, if this is the lab that it's the most amazing lab with the most, I don't know, cutting edge style and techniques and so on. But then when I was in Germany with that weather, I realized that no, that's not my path. I mean, I still wanna do something out of the lab. For example, I was on the beach today, so I mean, it depends also on the sacrifice you are willing to do, you know. But yeah, the lab mates, they are one of the most important things. For example, last time, I mean, it's been like 2 months that I cannot work with cardiomyocytes because they are not differentiated good, and I was so stressed. And I was crying with my lab mates because I need to do that. And imagine if maybe I couldn't have a good relationship with my colleagues. But I mean, at the end, I always found my place with the colleagues in Italy, in Germany, and Spain. That was really good. Maybe because we are all young, maybe because our generation is different from the other generation. I always felt like I can show myself, even with Germans that are kind of different from the Spanish people. I mean, but my experience was good. I mean, I still have to work in 2 other different places. I'm looking forward to it, and hopefully COVID will end soon. I don't know soon, but let's see. And yeah, but I guess this to change lab, change colleagues, change techniques and mentors is something that I really suggest to people that want to work in science, because you can learn different ways to see science, to work, to also analyze, and really like just think about how I'm gonna do this, you know, these experiments. Yeah, just that.
Yeah, especially in terms of thinking about science and how many different fields are out there. Paul, I was hoping you can go more into the research side and also clinical, being with patients, because a lot of times students think the only way they can be with patients is becoming a doctor. And I think it's a very hidden aspect of just the STEM field of going into patient care in different avenues. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about your field and also how you got into it and found out about it.
Absolutely. Yeah, I had the same thing. I thought that you had to be a doctor or a nurse or a healthcare professional to work with patients. I also knew very early on that I didn't want to work in a lab. So that's why I finished my degree. Then I started looking for a job after university. This was 2003, I think, 2004. And then I actually moved to London for this role, working in a phase 1 clinical research facility, doing first in human trials. And that was the moment I realized there was different options actually. And that's what I obviously learned in that year, working in that organization, running clinical trials on behalf of pharmaceutical companies, basically, that there is lots of options. And actually I realized very early on that the commercial direction was also not me, and I wanted to do the non-commercial way, which was the universities and the NHS. So I think once you're in a job, you kind of realize you start looking, don't you? You kind of specialize in that role. And so I started looking for different opportunities. Then I realized there was jobs to be a study coordinator, which is running clinical trials with physicians and nurses. And so I did that for a few years. I went into pain research for a while, and then I moved into pediatrics at Great Ormond Street. And then the job that I stayed in for many years was at Guy's and St Thomas's, which is a London hospital. And it was as a quality manager. So there's lots of different roles you can go into. And I kind of moved around. I did patient facing stuff. Then I started doing regulatory work. So overseeing the clinical trials from a regulatory perspective, doing monitoring, checking the data, checking the patient adverse events, for example. And then I moved into auditing, which was the job I did for the most of my 30s, actually. So I turned 40 last year. So 2010 to 2020, I was working at Guy's, overseeing clinical trials from a quality assurance perspective. So there's lots of different jobs you can do. And yeah, I think talking about passion, my passion has always been communication, actually, and writing. And I didn't do it at the start, because I didn't think I could. And then it's taken me 20 years to realize I can, and I've gone back into it. So I think go with your passion, because you never know. I think you know at the start, you know that you know what you want to do, basically, and trust yourself and trust your gut, because I think that will lead you in the right direction.
Yeah, I think echoing what Jordan said much earlier is just not thinking you're quitting, but really just, throwing yourself into different, areas and not being afraid. Jamie, I was wondering if you can speak a little about your non-traditional path, and especially in terms of finding jobs, that align with your interests, especially because, from geology to, space, there's just so much. So how did you really navigate that and narrow down your search?
So I would say a lot of my search has just been purely through networking. Every time I went to JPL's open house, I used that as an opportunity to meet with the Earth Sciences department that works on, the Mars missions and more, to talk to them about my path. And I've gotten a lot of really great insight that a lot of those engineers started out where I was, where one of them, Dr. John Wright, was actually doing water quality testing very early on in his career. But more so, for me, it's been very unique. A lot of it's just kind of been opportunity that had presented itself just from networking. So with the role with Pacific Spaceflight, a lot of people don't realize there's this realm of citizen science. And citizen science is the reason how Virgin Galactic's newest astronaut, Kelly, I can't pronounce her last name, so I call her Kelly G. She's the youngest woman mother astronaut that's been chosen, and she's actually a citizen scientist. She's invested with like these extracurricular type programs that get you the certifications to do these research experiments. And so that's how she was chosen to be a payload specialist, where she will be going to space to do a bunch of different research and experiments for them. For me, it kind of follows in that same realm of just, I've self-taught myself so many different things to be able to just network and figure out which paths to go. But a lot of it has really led me into the realm of science communications and what I do, and just encouraging others to find that path for themselves. Pacific Spaceflight was one that networked through the NASA JPL Solar System Ambassador Program, which is one where I actually gained professional development hours from. So I've gotten this question in my live chat last night when I was on TikTok, with someone was like, "Oh, you must be making 100K." And I'm like, no. Oh my gosh, no. I was like, a lot of the things that I have done is a lot of self-investing to get that knowledge, to get that experience, because it will pave the way for those future opportunities. Because one of the biggest struggles in my geology field is that they're now seeing all this aerospace experience, and they're actually considering me to be a little not qualified for some of these positions, even though my environmental science experience lines up. They see this aerospace and space science communications. So it's actually been a little bit difficult if you navigate between two major fields. So I'm still in the process of that type of job selection, because ultimately it's just a little bit more interesting for me, because I have a little bit greater experience now in space science, but I have a geology background. But a realm that people can really consider is going into citizen science projects, which NASA hosts a bunch. There's different organizations that also create the classes, so that way you can become certified. And so you don't necessarily always have to fully be in a master's or PhD program to be able to do some of the things, or to achieve the dreams like Kelly with being an astronaut.
Absolutely. And I definitely think you've taken advantage of every opportunity and just learning so much. So, it's truly inspiring. But someone asked a question in the chat that I wanted to see if Jordan could start off and answer. They said, so I've wondered what it's like to be a PhD student, as in how dedicated do you have to be? Is it something that's always on your mind, regardless of whether it's a weekend or vacation? Does your passion drive you enough endlessly to work towards it?
Yeah, and this is such a great question. I grapple with thoughts like these all the time as a PhD student, and I know that people in my program do as well. And this kind of links to the original question that Karissa answered as well. How do you know that the lab is for you? Like, what signs are there, and how do you know that you have passion? And so I guess I'll start there. To be brutally honest, lab is very hard. You're set up to not get the results you want. Like, as a scientist, you're supposed to fail. And for me, I fail all the time. Like, I fail every day. All my experiments sometimes feel like they're not working. But I think how you know the lab is for you and how science, like, you fit in science is if you want to go back. Like, I get home and, like, sometimes I'll be in the lab and I'll be like, I need to go home. Like, this is just very frustrating. But when I wake up the next day, a lot of times the first things that I think are, oh my God, I could have done this. Or, I could, there's so many variables that I'm thinking about, and I want to know the answer. And so if you have that curiosity and that drive, maybe not in the moment when you just, received, an experiment that didn't work, but, in the future, I think that's a really strong sign that science is for you. In terms of, like, work-life balance and workload, I've been very pleasantly surprised, I would say, with the work-life balance here at Caltech. And I can only really speak for the organic chemistry department here in my lab, but science here seems very collaborative and supportive. And I was expecting, I had heard, that PhD is difficult, especially at Caltech, and that, it's you can have imposter syndrome and feel like you're working too much. I will say I was exposed to that in my experience in undergrad at Berkeley. And I just thought that if I put my head down and that I just follow my passion, that it will work out. And what I will say is that research is not always on my mind here. It certainly is something that I feel very devoted to, but does not consume my life. And I'm very pleasantly surprised with the work-life balance here. So, great question.
If I can add something about that, because, for example, I left Germany because it was really stressful, because I used to go to the lab at 9 and leave the lab at 1 a.m., for example. But it's not because of Germany. It depends on your lab and your institution and the environment you have in your lab. And in that lab, there were people like working 14 hours per day, and it was really stressful, and I felt like that's not the life I want to do. So I changed it. And also for this reason, I guess changing the lab, it's something useful to understand what you want and which kind of environment you want to work with. And now in Spain it's totally different.
And kind of building off of that, I wanted to ask, how do you deal with burnout on a day-to-day basis, especially when the lab gets very monotonous and same thing over and over? What's kind of your tips to stay motivated?
Keep your hobbies, anything that you have on the side that you can look forward to. Like, if shit hits the fan in the lab, you know what? I'm going to go to my dance class and I'm going to just have a good time there, or I'm going to cook myself a meal. I was burning out really quickly you can develop this cycle where you try an experiment, it fails, and you feel like, oh no, I need to make up for the fact that it failed, like, because I wasted some time, so now I have to work even harder to make sure that, like, I'm on track, like, you're always worried about your timeline and stuff like that. But that will, like, burn you out so quickly. And I found that if I just, made a mistake or did something like that, I should just step away from it for a little bit, and then, kind of get some fresh perspective. My coworkers and I, we usually work in the lab, and then we would have a break and we would go to like an F45 class together. And then we would come back to the lab and just like continue stuff. But it just felt nice to do something or look forward to something else. So even if things didn't really work out in the lab, there was something that like gave you joy. And just because you fail or something doesn't work out, it doesn't mean you're a bad scientist at all. Like, I think sometimes you can take it personally and be like, I'm not meant to be here, and you know, imposter syndrome, I can't really come up with good experiments, like what's going on. But it's, everyone's journey is different. Everyone is going to be working on completely different projects. So some people are going to have like an easy breezy time in grad school, and it seems like everything works out. And then I think you have to work on not like comparing yourself to other people, because we're not doing the same thing. We're all doing something different. And the amount of effort and drive that each person has is very different. So you could be working like 8 hours, 9 hours, 10 hours a day and be as productive as someone that you see who's working like 16, 12 hours in the lab. And, you know, you just have to find what works best for you. But I would say you don't have to always be working or thinking about your project. It's okay to be a human and to like have other interests.
It's okay to be human. Being aware of the time, I really want to move into part 2 of our Q&A about LGBTQ and diversity. So my first question is, how does being a member of the LGBTQ community affect your daily life? Maybe Paul, you can start us off.
Yeah, I think in the early parts of my career, I found it really difficult to come out at work, because that was in the 2000s, and yeah, things have changed a lot actually over the last 20 years, especially with my career. I had lots of microaggressions that I experienced in the first few roles I had. So I didn't really recognize them as microaggressions then. That's the kind of term that I've discovered in recent years and I've learned about. So yeah, it's when I look back, I go, okay, yeah, that was a microaggression, and that happened quite a lot. In particular, related to things like, I don't know, are you married? Do you have a kid? Do you have a wife? I get that question all the time. No, I don't have a wife. It's very gender stereotype thing to ask, and I think it took me many years to kind of recognize that being out was really important, and visibility was important. So as the years passed, I started to be more open earlier on, rather than kind of being in the closet. When I started a new job, I'd be very open about my partners and my life, and that's really important to me.
Thank you. Maybe Jordan, you can go next.
Yeah, I am extremely lucky in many regards on this topic. Mostly, I think, because I have been in I've had really great experiences with my LGBT identity in STEM, and I think that really comes from kind of joining a system that has been focusing on fixing these kinds of problems. And so at Berkeley's really well known for being inclusive, and I had great experiences there in STEM. And coming to Caltech, it's been arguably the same or even better in terms of creating opportunities for LGBT scientists and connecting us. Sometimes, you know, especially at Caltech, since it's a smaller school, you can feel like you might be the only one, or like definitely a minority in science. And I would say that that's kind of the biggest hurdle for me. But in terms of, you know, going out and reaching out to people that I know and connecting with individuals, I feel like my identity has only given me opportunities. So I feel extremely grateful for that.
Thank you. And along what you said in terms of community, I was wondering, Jamie, if you can touch on how being part of the LGBTQ community and a woman in STEM has kind of shaped your daily life, especially being in such a, I would say, male-dominated, you know, field. And tell me if I'm wrong, but in terms of NASA and JPL.
So that's definitely, so I will say that JPL is, in my opinion, much more diverse and inclusive than NASA is as a whole. If you were actually to go out to the Instagram page, you would see that JPL is proudly sharing all those who are part of the LGBTQ plus community and individual posts, and they go by saying out and proud as their like statement piece for it. NASA is a little bit different. I feel like they fall in this very professionalism part, but I think that's also based on where most of the NASA facilities are, which are deep south, East Coast. I grew up in the Bible Belt, so it's been very interesting to finally own who I am to people who very much are judgmental from the South. I'm still getting used to it. It's not something that I've expressed too much in the fields of geology because it's very male dominated, and they already, for me, look at me very feminine at that too. I've had a lot of issues with that when I was in the corporate offices, even when I had my first internship. They just saw me to be, that typical stereotypical pretty female, and it's been a lot of years to finally be like, no, this is me and this is who I am. And now that I have what TikTok has given me with the amazing space family, to finally be able, like when I was sharing this event, I was like, this is my first time being openly communicative about an event, and to be a part of this community to everyone back home in the South in a way to let them know, like, this is inclusive for everyone, and y'all need to see that there are so many intelligent women, individuals, and more who are part of this community. Thankfully, my city is one that has grown to be more accepting. I grew up in Mobile, Alabama, but it's still something where I'm very careful to express it in the field, especially when it comes to NASA and JPL events, because the South is just really dynamic. You just kind of have to be careful, and I never want the opportunity to be taken away from someone's child wanting to learn about science because the parent might disagree. So it's one of those things I feel for around, like, the energy of the people that I'm around before ever expressing that part of myself, just because it's still a field to kind of navigate if you're in that Bible Belt region. But you go out West Coast, far different. Living in Washington State gave me a great experience in that. Working on the Pacific Space Flight Experiment was super amazing. It's just, I could be myself. And so it's still something that's navigating.
No, thank you. And along those lines, I wanted to open up the question, have you ever experienced homophobia in the workplace, and what happened, if you want to share, and how you moved on from that experience? Anything on advice as well with that?
One thing I will say is, in STEM, I've had a really great experience. But I also was balancing playing on the hockey team at Berkeley all 4 years. And so to kind of relate to Karissa saying that you should keep your hobbies, I'm really grateful that I did that in undergrad. It was a great outlet outside of chemistry. But I did experience some homophobia on the team, and it was really discouraging for me because I thought that, I was in such a great accepting place being in the Bay in California, yet there was still some microaggressions that I was experiencing, or just flat out aggression. And I would say the best response to that for me, has been to not take it personally and to focus on what you can do to fix the situation. And so I feel like I took that, negative information and stood up to it on the team on a smaller level, and I addressed it. And I think that really gained a lot of respect from my teammates, and how hard it was for me to experience these negative opinions, I guess. And so, I was very grateful for how my teammates responded, and electing me as president later and assistant captain of the team. And I took that even further, and I wanted to bring to light this kind of behavior, and so on a campus level. And so I worked for student orientation for 4 years, and so I reached out to new student services at Berkeley, and wanted to do a presentation on being LGBT and being in sports. And so I was lucky enough to have a segment as part of the diversity and inclusion programming for all new students at Berkeley, about 10,000 students. So I would say you can tackle things head on if you feel comfortable. If you don't, just don't take it personally and keep going.
Well, that's awesome. And I invite anyone else to answer that question, but being aware of the time, I also want to move into our final question, which is, if you could go back in time, do it again, would you do anything differently? And if not, what's the biggest piece of advice you have for someone who would want to go into your field? And maybe everyone can answer this question. Start with Marilu.
Well, if I could change something, I would say fuck you to my, oh, can I say fuck you? Sorry. To my tutor in Italy, because she was really without any respect in with me. I felt like I'm stupid. I cannot do anything. I couldn't touch the cells, like, for example. It's, of course, when you have a student, you have to wait until they start working with them, because you can just do something wrong, just one thing, and they die. But of course, I waited like 6 months, and then I waited 9 months to work with the cells that I was supposed to do the thesis with. So it was awful. But I felt really alone, because when I was the student, she said, you are no one. You are like, you are not even supposed to say anything, And if I could go back, I would say that that word to her, and maybe I would talk with my professor. But yes, maybe just that, like, you are not alone. And if someone tells you that you're stupid, that it's just because they don't know how to deal with other people and to really have a great relationship with the lab mates, and how to do mentorship, because it's not for everyone to teach also. And yeah, just that. What was the other question? I forgot.
Oh, I think you're good. That was awesome. Maybe Paul, you could go next.
If I could go back, it would be, a few of you mentioned the imposter syndrome. Unfortunately, the imposter syndrome never goes. And it's something that I would have, if I could go back, I'd tell myself it's never going to go. Accept it and just be yourself and keep going. And every time I achieve something, I still have that imposter syndrome. And that's something that you just have to accept. So yeah, just go with it and be you and follow your passions, and you'll be fine.
We'd have a whole webinar on imposter syndrome again, maybe next month. Karissa?
I would say I was always very hard on myself, and I would tell myself like, oh, you're not good enough, or you messed up, or like, other people wouldn't mess up, other people could do this better, or whatever. So I was probably my worst obstacle. And I would just say, like, you gotta get rid of that voice. Like, you are in the spot that you are because of how much work you've done. You were selected. I am a National Science Foundation fellow, and I still am like, oh my gosh, why? And I would just say, like, to my younger, like, if I was a little girl, just be like, you can do it. It's okay if you mess up. Don't be afraid. Yes, there are other smarter people, but it's okay. Like, we're all different, and you can actually look up to those smarter people and ask them for help. It's actually greater if you're in an environment where everyone else can offer something that you can learn. So I think just probably redirecting these sort of like insecurities into something positive. And I'm still working on that.
Definitely want to echo what you said about not being afraid to ask for help. And I think that's really hard for, even me to accept sometimes. Maybe Jamie, go next.
So I think particularly for me, if I could go back, I really wish my neurodivergency with my dyslexia and stuff was detected a lot sooner, because my grades outcome would have been a lot different, to where I probably at this time would have been in a master's program and more. I remember my professor telling me that I would never get into a master's program because of my GPA. And if I go back in time, I would just give him that middle finger and be like, well, you don't need to be in a master's program to change the world. And so that's something that I've learned with my passion, is that I've been able to use what has carried me through to now inspire others. And to go back in time to younger self is to just be like, you're different, and it's okay that you're different. You're going to inspire so many others later on in life with your differenceness. And so that's for anyone that's watching, is you're going to fail. There's going to be failure. And that's the best part about science, is then you learn, how can I succeed the next time? And I've definitely I have failed physics a bunch of times because it took my brain so many times to figure out how to get it to wrap around how this professor who's neurotypical explains things to someone where my brain thinks in a three-dimensional sense, and et cetera. I finally got an A in that physics class, and et cetera, like that. So it's just one of those things to keep trying. Failure is going to happen. Hold on to your passion and it will guide you.
Thank you. And last but not least, Jordan.
Yeah, I have two pieces of advice. The first is to stay curious. And it's easy to think like, oh, I'll just, keep asking questions. But one thing that I will emphasize is that ask those questions and then follow up on them, because you have a lot of thoughts. And just, I want you to remember that those thoughts are intelligent and that you can ask questions and receive information from experiments that you run if you see that that is for you. One thing that I really love about organic chemistry is that its foundations are in physics, and it's a physical science. A lot of people may not think of chemistry as a physical science, but as an organic chemist, I certainly do, in that the results that you get are rooted based on physical principles about the world, and that you can take these theories and ask questions and that are intelligent. You might not feel like it, but I promise you, you are. And that leads to my second piece of advice, and that is be resourceful. You have so many things that you might not even know are available to you, maybe because you haven't, taken that step. And it involves maybe taking that step, but also just being open-minded in opportunities that come your way. As Karissa was saying, your PhD can be very difficult and you can feel alone. But if you focus on being resourceful, and being actively resourceful, you can make a heck of a lot more progress and than you originally thought possible. So that's it.
Yeah, and don't think that you're not good enough.
Certainly.
I wrote that down. Stay resourceful and stay curious. Thank you all so much. And I'm reminding myself of what Karissa said, how you emailed every single person, every professor. It only takes that one response, and look where you are today. You don't give yourself enough credit. None of you do, in my opinion. But again, thank you all so much for taking the time out of your day to participate in this panel. I'm so appreciative for all of you for sharing your journeys, both professionally and personally. I know I've learned so much from the discussion today, and I hope everyone enjoyed this opportunity. Your presence here will guide so many students in STEM, and I hope to see many of you on the Discord. So if people want to ask additional questions, especially in terms of your research, Marilu, with your 3D tissues, need to learn more about that. Again, a quick note, the webinar will be recorded. The recording will go up on YouTube, sorry. I look forward to interacting with everyone on the STEM Potential Discord. We will now take a 15-minute break before we start our next session, which is PhD and master students in more physics, technology, and math. Again, a huge thank you to Marilu, Paul, Karissa, Jamie, and Jordan. If you all want to drop your socials in the chat for everyone to see. But again, all of this information will go up on our Instagram page at STEM Potential and on the website as well to read their full bios and socials. So thank you all so much again, and see you in 15 minutes. Stick around.